Coming up on this episode of Booked on Rock, this is the story of the song Hey Joe. Made famous by Jimi Hendrix, it's a song that binds nearly every strand of 20th century American popular music. Welcome back to Booked on Rock. I'm Eric Senich. This episode's guest is Jason Schneider. He is the author of the brand new book called That Gun in Your Hand, The Strange Saga of Hey Joe and Popular Music's History of Violence. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Great to be here, Eric. Thanks.
Congrats on the book. First off, phenomenal job with the book, but what a fascinating topic.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to probably the first time I played my dad's copy of Are You Experienced when I was 10 or 11 years old. And it was one of those moments, you know, I'm sure you've had them in your life too, where you put a record on and you're just mesmerized for 45 minutes just listening to it. That was my experience with
yes, pun intended. Now, were you like me and most people? Did you assume Hey Joe was a Hendrix original when you first heard it?
Sure. Yeah. At that age, I didn't know anything about songwriting, but you know, as I got older, started listening to more artists, suddenly I'd see Hey Joe popping up in different places, different artists doing it. And that got me to wondering a bit about its origins. And then I went back to Are You Experienced? I saw the writing credit was by this guy, Billy Roberts, who I knew nothing about. And it turns out there was really no information about him anywhere. So that kind of got me going on trying to unravel this mystery too of who Billy Roberts was and what his career was all about.
A very interesting backstory to the song. So talk about how this book is divided into two parts.
Yeah, well, the first half is really, it goes back to Hey Joe's origins in murder ballads early, well, I guess maybe you could go back to the late 19th century and then early blues and country recordings from the 20s and 30s. And then how that sort of influenced Billy Roberts into actually writing the song Hey Joe. And then the journey it kind of took from Billy through a whole bunch of different artists doing it before Hendrix. And then the first half of the book ends with Jimmy's version and where he kind of took it. Then the second half is basically discussing different artists who covered the song after Jimmy's death.
Quite a few artists have recorded the song, it turns out. Patti Smith's version may be the most interesting beyond Hendrix's version, but that's one we'll get to as well. Although other songs similarly updated themes found in early American blues, folk, and country in the rock and roll era, Hey Joe offered something different. It's a visceral drama. A man describes how he shoots his unfaithful lover to death and intended to get away with it. Why do you think this song resonated so profoundly with so many people, musicians and music fans?
I think there's a few reasons. Number one, the song's structure itself is very simple. The chord pattern, it's based on what's known as the circle of fifths, which people who have a basic understanding of blues music, a typical blues song is 3 chords, a 1, 4, 5. But with Hey Joe, there's 2 additional chords thrown in there. So it kind of circles around itself, I guess, creating the term circle of fifths. So there's really no resolution to it. And interestingly enough, people might not realize it doesn't have a chorus. It's just kind of one verse after another. And the verses themselves, it's constructed as a conversation between Joe and his friend. It's got that really personal side that I think anyone can relate to. And then to go deeper into the psychology behind it, I think all of us can relate in one way to another to crimes of passion, of being in a situation where we have to pull back before we do anything drastic. And I think that has resonated.
I think that's part of the fascination just in general with people with true crime. It's very similar. There's just some fascination that we have with this. How can a man cross that line? The one line in the song that really gets me, and it's real simple, but hey Joe, where you going with that gun in your hand?
Yeah.
And right away you're thinking, whoa, what's up? What is this guy going to do?
Yeah, and that kind of puts the listener in the position of that person asking the question. So, you know, right away the listener is involved in the song, waiting to hear what Joe's answer is going to be, and having that kind of dialogue.
So Billy Roberts, hard to believe that his 2017 death went unreported by all news outlets in this day and age, but that's what happened. The book presents previously unpublished information about his life. So tell us about Billy Roberts.
Yeah, well, I think his life was kind of mysterious by his own choice. He was born in South Carolina in the late 30s, I believe. So he kind of grew up within that early blues scene in that region of the country. And that's where he kind of developed his love of music and folk music and blues. By the time he reached his early 20s, he decided to go where the action was, which was Greenwich Village in New York City. And this was all pre-Bob Dylan. Billy he arrived in New York almost exactly a year before Dylan did. So it was a slightly different scene. It was a scene where the singers, very few of them wrote their own material. Very few of them cared about making records. Most of them just thought it was a hassle. They weren't really concerned about making money in general. They just wanted to play this music and share it with people. So that was kind of the world that Billy stepped into. And almost as soon as he arrived, he met a woman who became his girlfriend there, a woman named Niela Miller, who was a folk singer herself. And she had this song called Baby, Please Don't Go to Town, which you can look it up on YouTube. And there are a lot of similarities to Hey Joe.
And Billy was fixated on that song.
Yeah. And he thought he could, I guess borrow it would be a generous term for the time, and kind of do something with it on his own. And so he kind of took that as a basis and injected his own experiences with the blues. And out of that came Hey Joe. And almost immediately, other artists in the Greenwich Village scene picked up on it too and started playing. And that's really where the song's journey began.
The history of murder ballads is interesting too. It became something that was part of the mainstream consciousness in 1958, the Kingston Trio's recording of the traditional ballad Tom Dooley.
Yeah.
But how far do we go back to find the origins of the murder ballad?
That's kind of hard to say, because you can go back to the British Isles in the 1600s, I think. There's songs about lovers killing each other. Obviously it's part of Shakespeare as well. But by the time folk songs were being documented in America in the early 20th century, that's when you see songs like Stagger Lee, songs based on real life events of people shooting each other. Then one of the main songs I also examine is Frankie and Johnny.
Yes, let's talk about that one. That turned the tables on a standard murder ballad, is what you wrote.
Yeah, that was a song, again, based on real life events. It was in St. Louis, I believe, where a woman found her boyfriend cheating on her. And during the course of a scuffle, she ended up shooting him. That was Frankie. And she ended up getting off on the charge due to self-defense. But almost immediately, one of the St. Louis barroom entertainers had written a song based on the events. And it became, I guess, what we would call a viral hit nowadays. People everywhere playing the song. And it ended up really kind of destroying her full name was Frankie Baker. It ended up really kind of destroying her life. She had to move out of town, start a new life. The song grew to inspire movies. She ended up suing the movie companies to no avail. And that really kind of started this whole notion of a murder ballad being embraced by popular culture.
And what year was that song came out?
Well, the first recordings of it would have been in the 1920s, late 1920s. And there was actually, I think it was one of Mae West's first movies. It was based on the song. That movie was a huge hit. It might have been one of the first movies to get an Oscar, actually, if I'm not mistaken. And then Stagger Lee, of course, that became a jazz standard, and then an R&B standard.
Grateful Dead. I'm a big Dead fan. I know Jerry Garcia played it a lot.
Yep, that's all about one man shooting another man after he stole his hat. Then through early country music, bluegrass music, and then that led to Tom Dooley being recorded by the Kingston Trio in the late 1950s.
In the prelude to the book, there's a story you tell. It's about Billy playing the song with another person. He was a street busker in 1960. Can you
Yeah.
tell this story? Where did you find out about this story too?
I got a lot of great research from a website. There's a guy in Europe who created a website to try to catalog every known version of Hey Joe. It's pretty monumental task,
I'd
but
love to know the number. What's the total number of that?
it'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
You can't even imagine. But anyway, on the website, a lot of his posts, he got some great responses from people, and that story I actually got from a woman who wrote in and commented saying that was her experience with Billy Roberts, who's busking with him in Paris in 1960. But he was there on a trip with another New York folk singer named Dino Valente, who he became good friends with. And Dino really, he played a crucial role in Hey Joe's next stage of kind of migrating to the West Coast and suddenly being adopted by almost every band in LA.
As somebody from Connecticut who also spent many years working in Danbury, Connecticut, I'm interested in the story of Chester Chet Powers, who went on to become Dino Valente, right?
Yeah.
So let's get into this. He was born October 7th, 1937 in Danbury, Connecticut. He and Billy Roberts later became friends. His first gig was at the Cafe Wha in Greenwich Village, which was run by Manny Roth, who happens to be the uncle of David Lee Roth of Van Halen fame. Dino Valente played Hey Joe often there and noted for his intense performance of the song. What was it that he did differently, and how did that come from his desire for a normal life while he was growing up?
I think what made his version stand out based on accounts of different artists, people like Richie Havens, who I was fortunate enough to talk to before he passed away. Dino took the song and really embodied it. He, as Richie kind of described, he was just a really intense guitar player. He basically put everything he had into playing that song, and that really moved a lot of people. And I think you can see that in Richie Havens' performances, how intense he played too. By watching him, you can kind of get an idea of what Dino Valente was like, since I haven't come across any footage of him playing or anything like that.
That's coming from when he was a kid. Dino, then known as Chester, he wanted a normal life, but he did not have one.
Yeah, that was something I was really fascinated to learn, that according to his sister, they grew up basically as the kids of carnival workers. So they would spend their summers traveling around in carnivals and kind of learning all the tricks of the trade, how to entertain people and at the same time, maybe pull a few fast ones on them. So that was sort of the reputation that Dino created, that he was a guy who basically felt he had a license to sort of do whatever he wanted and he could get away with it.
There's an important decision that Billy Roberts makes in 1962 regarding this song, Hey Joe. He goes to the Library of Congress to register copyright for this song. This is huge. Talk about how important of a decision that turned out to be. Do you think that he felt the urgency to do it because other artists are performing it a lot?
I couldn't really say definitively what motivated him to do it, but like I said, at that time, folk singers weren't concerned about copywriting if they'd written an original song, they weren't really concerned about copywriting it. That obviously began to change with Bob Dylan, who almost at that exact time in early 1962, Bob had just signed his first record deal with Columbia, and his new manager, Albert Grossman, was encouraging him to start writing his own songs, basically just as a way to make money, to try to get other artists to cover them. At that time, Bob had just signed his first publishing deal, and the rest, of course, is history. So whether Billy knew about that, I'm not sure, but by that time he was based in Washington, D.C., so it wasn't too hard for him just to pop over to the Library of Congress, do a search to see if anyone had registered a copyright. No one had, so he went ahead and did it.
Jason Schneider is the author of That Gun in Your Hand, The Strange Saga of Hey Joe and Popular Music's History of Violence. How does Hey Joe find its way to David Crosby?
That's another fascinating twist. So Crosby was just starting out his own career as a folk singer and made his way from LA to New York. And when he got there, Dino Valente was one of the first people he became friends with, and they had very similar personalities. So naturally, David Crosby learned Hey Joe from Dino. And when Crosby went back to LA, he just started raving to everyone he knew about this guy from New York he was friends with, Dino Valente. He was one of the greatest singers he'd ever heard. So he eventually convinced Dino to come out to LA to make some demos. And at that time, the Byrds were just starting to come together through Roger McGuinn and Gene Clark. Crosby was part of that original trio. And yeah, Crosby, he made the offer to Dino, do you want to join this new band I'm forming? We're going to play folk music with electric instruments. Dino declined for whatever reason, but Crosby still took up the song, Hey Joe, and that became kind of his showpiece in the early Byrds repertoire. And by all accounts, too, it was one of their showstoppers. Most of the early fans loved hearing it.
I remember hearing the Leaves version of Hey Joe maybe 15 years ago or so. Once YouTube became a thing, you could listen to anything, and then streaming services. So that was around the first time I heard that. They're the first band to release an electric version of this song, correct?
I think a version in general, they were the first band to, yeah.
Yeah, now there is a Byrds connection to this version. Who were the Leaves and what was their connection to the Byrds regarding Hey Joe?
After the Byrds signed their record deal with Columbia, at that time they were the house band at a club on Sunset Strip called Ciro's. And so after they signed with Columbia, they had to give up the residency. They were going to go on tour. So every band in LA wanted to step in to fill in, and the Leaves got the gig. So to kind of maintain that Byrds audience, they added Hey Joe to their repertoire just to keep the Byrds fans happy.
That actually leads us to Jimi Hendrix and why he ends up recording it. The story of how Hey Joe lands on Hendrix's radar. Okay, this is a great story. So he heard the 1966 version by singer-songwriter Tim Rose, but I think he also had heard the Leaves version at some point, but I'm not sure. But the Tim Rose version is the one.
Well, right, like that, yeah, that's where the story gets really complicated because
yes, this is the amazing case of serendipity.
Even before that, so we have the West Coast version of Hey Joe, which is popular, but then we've got this guy on the East Coast named Tim Rose, struggling singer-songwriter, and he hears a version of Hey Joe played by another Greenwich Village artist. And
it's just crazy how many people were playing that song.
Yeah, exactly. So Tim Rose hears the song, and he claimed throughout his life that he'd never heard the song before until he'd heard this other guy, Vince Martin, play it for him. So he said, so where did you get this song? Vince Martin couldn't tell him. So Tim Rose just kind of took it up. He created his own arrangement of it, which was a little bit more slowed down, a little bit more bluesy. And he ended up signing a record deal with Columbia as well and recorded his version of Hey Joe, which didn't really become a hit, but it was just such a special recording that even the record label, like they pull out all the stops to make it a hit, but they just couldn't make it happen. So anyway, fast forward to the summer of 1966, Jimi Hendrix is playing around Greenwich Village with pickup bands. He's decided to turn his back on being an R&B sideman. He wants to do his own thing. He's kind of struggling, and just by happenstance, one night, the girlfriend of Keith Richards, a woman named Linda Keith, a British model, she pops into a club where Jimmy's playing, and just like anyone would be, she immediately falls in love with him. And they begin this really kind of short, intense relationship where Linda is firmly committed that she needs to make Jimmy a star one way or another. At this time, the Rolling Stones are on tour, so Keith Richards is kind of safely out of the picture. One night in New York, Linda runs into the Animals bassist, Chaz Chandler, who tells her that he's about to leave the band. He wants to move into record production and management. And Linda says, well, if that's your plan, you got to check out this guy, Jimi Hendrix. He's going to blow your mind. So part of Chaz Chandler's plan is is that he's a fan of Tim Rose's version of Hey Joe, and he wants to find someone to record it so it could become a big hit in England. He's convinced it will. So Linda Keith has absorbed all this information. She goes back to Jimmy and says, look, I've invited Chaz Chandler to come see you, but something you got to do. You got to play this song, Hey Joe, for him. Chances are, I'm almost certain Jimmy had no idea what the song was. So he had to quickly learn it. The next day, of course, Chaz Chandler walks into the club. Jimmy's up on stage. He starts playing Hey Joe, and the stars align.
Wow. That is one of the coolest stories. That's one of the greatest stories in rock and roll. Yeah, let's get into Jimmy's version, which was recorded in London. So there's a mix of the Leaves bass line with the Tim Rose arrangement here, and it's interesting to read that Hendrix threatened to walk out of the studio after getting into an argument with Chaz Chandler.
Yeah, that was another thing I didn't really realize until I kind of dug into it. Like, this was really the first time that Jimmy had sung his own songs in a professional recording studio. Obviously, he was nervous, and Chaz actually brought in a female backing chorus. They're not that prominent, but you can kind of hear them in the background, giving him a little support. And yeah, evidently they went through a lot of takes just trying to get it right. And when you're trying to achieve that sort of perfection, of course, tempers can get frayed. And at one point, the story goes, yeah, Jimmy did threaten to walk out, but then Chaz said, well, hey, I've got your passport. You're not going anywhere. That was the other funny story about those sessions was Jimmy approached it as if he were on stage. So he just instinctively just cranked his amp up to maximum. And that's something that the studio engineer had never experienced before. So all of a sudden, here's Jimmy playing a top volume and, all kinds of things rattling around the studio. But Jimmy refused to turn down. That was the sound. So they had to kind of eventually work out a compromise. And, people have debates all the time about the origins of hard rock or heavy metal. But I think going back to that time, 1966, when Jimmy and, bands like The Who were just first starting to make records, they wanted volume. And that's, of course, Cream, Eric Clapton, the birth of the Marshall amplifier. I think all of that just, if you want to trace the origins of heavy metal back to anything, I think that's where I would go.
And Jimmy's version went to number 12 on the British R&B chart, top 40 on the pop side. It's gone on to become the definitive version. The impression that it made, it was quick. It was within weeks of the single coming out. And many bands and artists started to jump on the song as well because they heard Jimmy's version.
Yeah, well, especially in England and Europe. Nobody knew the song the way they kind of did in America. So all these artists immediately, they not only connected Hey Joe to Jimmy, but this was him giving his first impression as an artist. You couldn't really separate Jimmy from Hey Joe for at least that initial period when he was in England. They released further singles, Purple Haze, of course, Wind Cries Mary, but Hey Joe became synonymous with him. And so anyone who wanted to imitate him, that was the place where they always started. So, you had bands like The Creation. I think they were the first British band to do it. And then not long after that, Deep Purple recorded a version for their debut album, which was a lot different, but still retained a lot of that Hendrix mystique about it.
Hendrix just had a way, like he did with All Along the Watchtower. It's the same thing. He just had a way of taking songs by other artists and making it his own. Now let's talk about Patti Smith's version from 74. This is another notable recording. Now this is an interesting story here because she was 23 years old. She's a struggling writer. She's not yet a full-time musician yet. She was invited to the grand opening of Electric Lady Studios' grand opening.
Well, she ended up at the Electric Lady party.
Covering it for a local newspaper or a magazine?
Yeah. She was writing articles about musicians. She was basically an early rock journalist. So she got an invitation to the studio opening. And yeah, she ended up having a brief but meaningful interaction with Jimmy. He had to leave the party, by all accounts, to catch a flight. He had to play the Isle of Wight festival. But yeah, Patti making that personal connection with Jimmy, that stayed with her. I'm sure it's still probably one of the most important moments of her life. So fast forward a few years when she begins making music herself. Early on, she's kind of in this sort of struggle of finding a way to turn her poetry into songs, which didn't really happen at first. So she had to use other people's material to kind of convey what she was feeling. So when it came time to make her first single, she chose to do Hey Joe, well, for very specific reasons, if you want to get into
Yes, the Patty Hurst thing. So, yeah, she includes the monologue about fugitive heiress Patty Hurst and her kidnapping in participation with the Symbionese Liberation Army. So, what was it that led her to include this in her version?
in that year, 1974, the Patty Hearst story was really kind of gripping the nation. It was on the news every night, people just having trouble believing that this young woman from great privilege was suddenly, people assumed she was brainwashed into joining this revolutionary, they might be called a terrorist organization nowadays, and committing these crimes. Of course, this was something that Patti Smith couldn't ignore either. And along with kind of sharing the same name, Patti Smith felt a connection to Patty Hearst in terms of feeling the pressure of patriarchal society coming down on her. And to tie that in with Hey Joe, of someone taking it upon themselves to do something through the use of a firearm, I guess, that's where it kind of happened. But yeah, Patti Smith's version, it's one of a kind, just because by the end of it, she's sort of speaking through Patricia Hearst's voice as, I'm tired of being oppressed. I'm tired of what society is doing to women. It's a version that really kind of turns the song's original story on its head. And that sets the tone, I think, for future versions where artists could really express their own societal frustrations through the song.
As for Billy Roberts, how did his life change after the song's popularity in terms of his financial status, in terms of his artistic pursuits?
It's a really interesting question because by that time, the late 60s, he was based in San Francisco. Interesting fact, for a time, he lived in a rooming house owned by Huey Lewis's mother.
Get out.
And yeah. And Huey, he made an Instagram post I found at one point that he said that he picked up harmonica from Billy Roberts.
Get out. Yeah, because Huey's from San Fran.
Yeah, but anyway, so Billy he was around the late 60s San Francisco scene, playing in various blues bands and stuff. But no, he kind of kept up his whole troubadour philosophy of just going out and playing music without really any concern for making money off of it. He did end up making a record in the mid 70s. I think it's called Thoughts on California. It's kind of hard to find. It's nothing really spectacular, but the odd thing is he never recorded Hey Joe himself.
Never recorded. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, there are home recordings of them doing it on YouTube, but he never officially recorded it as a single or put it on an album or anything. I think he was happy just to get the royalties from Jimmy's version.
Well, yeah, he had to have put a few bucks in his pocket, but according to the book, that lasted only so long.
Yeah, that goes back to his relationship with Dino Valente in the mid 60s, where it got really complicated because Dino had some serious legal problems. He actually went to jail for a period for drug possession. And in order to pay his legal fees to get out of jail, he ended up making a deal with an LA publisher saying that he had written Hey Joe, which wasn't the case. And when Billy found out about it, he showed his Library of Congress registration, and through legal wrangling, Billy ended up getting the copyright. But anyways, it was something that he just sort of helped him maintain the life he wanted throughout the 70s. I saw stories that he would play on cruise liners. He'd record radio jingles for people. And, whenever the mood struck him, he would still go out there and busk on the street.
More so just because I think that was just who he was.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And sadly, I can't remember what year it was, sometime in the early 80s, he was involved in a pretty serious car wreck that left him with permanent head injuries. And
he was lucky to live through that.
He was lucky to live through that. And that was really kind of the end of the story for him. He lived many years after that, but he could never really play music again, unfortunately. And yeah, he just sort of fell off the map after that.
This book gives him the recognition he deserves, though. He really should be recognized more.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of my intentions. And the power of Hey Joe lives on. I added a little story right at the very end where a couple years ago, a city in Poland, they decided to try to set a Guinness Book of World Records for the number of guitar players playing Hey Joe together at the same time. I can't remember the number. It was in the hundreds, but Steve Vai was there to kind of conduct them.
Yeah, a song that'll outlive all of us. The forward in the book, by the way, Lenny Kaye, speaking of Patti Smith, right? The guitarist from the Patti Smith group. So you were able to get him to do the forward.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that he agreed to do that. And to me, it was the perfect choice given, not only he played on Patti's version, but as kind of the garage rock guru, he knows every version of Hey Joe that exists. So to get his seal of approval, that meant the world to me.
That Gun on Your Hand, The Strange Saga of Hey Joe and Popular Music's History of Violence. It's out now, and it goes much deeper than what we've discussed here. We've just basically scratched the surface. There's so much in this book that you're going to want to read about the history of not just Hey Joe, the song, but murder ballads in general. It is an amazing read. It's available wherever books are sold, right?
Yeah, Anvil Press, based in Vancouver. You can order it from their website. And I just confirmed today, actually, that their U.S. distributor should have it out by the middle of next month.
Great. Where can people find you online, Jason, if they want to reach out to you?
JasonSchneiderMedia.com. I'm always happy to meet new people and answer questions.
Great, man. It was great meeting you. And again, congrats on this book. It's a fascinating book, a must read for fans of music history.
Excellent. I really enjoyed it, Eric. Thank you.